Jonathan, if you have a different view, if you feel very sensitively about this mosque and you don't like the idea of metal detectors there, I'd like to hear from you as well. 0345 6060973. I'm Matt Stadlen, LBC, leading Britain's conversation coming up to 20 past 1.
LBC with Matt Stadlen. Call 0345 6060973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
Full switchboard. It's a full switchboard, and I'm not surprised. 3 Israelis stabbed to death in the West Bank settlement after 3 Palestinians killed in bloody clashes. Tensions are high in the Middle East at the moment. Why? Because of the murder of 2 Israeli police officers last week in this incredibly holy site, and thereafter metal detectors being erected by the Israeli state for security reasons. Indeed, prayers, I think, were stopped altogether in the immediate aftermath of that attack. The 3 gunmen were killed themselves. Mahmoud Abbas, who's the Palestinian president, he's condemned the attack. He condemned the attack last week in what was described as a rare phone call to the Israeli president, Benjamin Netanyahu, and that was according to the Palestinian Wafa news agency. Since then, as I say, 3 Israelis stabbed to death. Jonathan mentioned that, I think, earlier in the show. 3 Israelis stabbed to death in a West Bank settlement on Friday night. That was just hours after 3 Palestinians were killed during violent clashes between Israeli forces and Palestinian demonstrators. And I'm asking you this morning, do you have sympathy for Israel in erecting those metal detectors? Is that just a common sense response to the cold-blooded murder of 2 of its police force? Or should they tread more carefully when you consider that the Temple Mount, that the Al-Aqsa Mosque is just so incredibly religious? It's such a holy site for Palestinians and for Muslims in general. In fact, the 3rd holiest site it's said to be in Sunni Islam. Let's go to David in Northampton, but not before I remind you of the number, even though we've got such a busy switchboard, 03456060973. Let's speak to David in Northampton. Welcome, David. Good morning. What would you like to say?
Thank you, Matt. Good morning. Yes, so I don't fully agree with the last 2 callers because I think they should do more. So I was in Israel 7 years ago for a friend's wedding, and I had to go through metal detectors just to get onto a train platform. I think that they should have airport-style body scanners there, and they should even ban people from accessing the Al-Aqsa Mosque for a period of, say, I don't know, a month, because that would disincentivise the people doing the attacks, which is also probably coordinated as well, because otherwise it's going to keep on happening. And I think we shouldn't care one jot for the perception of people for an act that's meant to be making people secure.
You shouldn't care one jot for the Palestinian people, you're saying?
No, that's not what I said. I don't think we should care one jot for anyone with the perception that they don't like metal detectors, because it's there for their security, and it's there for security of the people that are operating and working there. So when people say, "Oh, well, I don't really like it, and it's not really very nice," well, I think they can just, they can jog on, can't they? Because why should their perception trump the security of people visiting?
Well, you'd like the Palestinian people to jog on for a month, so you'll go, as you say, far further than merely metal detectors. You want them to jog on for a month in order to disincentivise further attacks. Don't you think that's a disproportionate reaction? Don't you think that is a heavy-handed reaction to, in a sense, criminalise a whole population because of 3 murderous gunmen or knife wielders?
I recognise that position, but I think that Israelis are being incredibly, tolerant right now of what's going on. I mean, you look at comparison across the region, there aren't churches really in Saudi Arabia. The freedom of expression of religion in Israel is much greater than that of the neighbouring countries and in the surrounding area. So I think they're already giving it a fair crack of the bat, trying to coexist in that area. And I don't have the knowledge or the answers for the whole area, but in the small lens of access to a building where the people are being attacked, they should have more security, even more. I basically think that security should come first and perception should come last.
David, stay with us if you wouldn't mind, yes, because I want to bring Abbas in, who's in Redbridge. Abbas, what do you make of what David just said?
You see, the problem here is that we always look at things in isolation. So, for example, we look at rockets flying into Israel and we start the clock there, as if that's what first instigated the whole conflict. This is 50 years of occupation. This is 1 million people who are refugees and millions of people who are refugees and hundreds of thousands of people who were loaded up on trucks under gunpoint and evicted from their homes. You've got settlers with guns who kill Palestinians. It happens all the time. Just because we don't report it here doesn't mean it's not happening. We have soldiers, we have checkpoints that utterly humiliate a population that is under siege for the last 50 years. We can keep pretending that there's this utopia, that this is perfect. And by the way, I'm not anti-Jewish and I'm not anti-Semite in any way whatsoever. I'm married to a Jew, quite frankly, so that puts that to rest, right? We have to be sensible here. The clock did not start when these 3 or 4 police officers were killed. It's a heinous act. It's a terrorist act to kill anyone, any innocent person who's not fighting you on the battlefield. That's a fact as far as Islam is concerned. But, to cite Saudi Arabia doesn't have churches, is not tolerant, and Israel on the other side is tolerant. I would advise your listeners to just listen to what another Jew says, Professor Norman Finkelstein, or another Jew, Chomsky. What do they say about the matter? They're Jews. Professor Norman Finkelstein lost both sides of his family in the Holocaust. His father and his mother are both Holocaust survivors. But when these people criticize Israel, criticize the government for their utter contempt and humiliation and terrorizing an innocent population, they're called self-hating Jews. They're just ignored.
They're called self-hating Jews by some, not by me. I'm half Jewish myself. I certainly wouldn't call anyone who criticises Israel for when I deem it to have made a mistake. I wouldn't say that's self-hating whatsoever. David, how would you respond to what Abbas just said?
Well, I recognise Abbas's position. I respect his view, even though I disagree. I think that in the region, though, I'm not Jewish. I've got Jewish friends, but there's 16 countries that forbid admission to Israeli passport holders: Algeria, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Lebanon, and that's something that Trump brought up in his move to seek to ban people from Islam-majority countries entering the states for a period of time. I think that what this comes down to, for me, looking at it, is what's more important: security or the perception of security measures.
It's not a perception. I just stop you there, David. Sorry to interrupt, but it's not a perception of security measures. It is the feeling by a people that they don't want to undergo the Israeli yoke as they go about their lawful duty, as they see it, their religious duty, to do their daily prayer. And I can understand that. If I were a Palestinian, I would want as little Israeli security presence in my face as possible. Can you at least understand their position, David?
Yes, I do. I fully understand it and respect it, and I also recognise the lack of my own knowledge on the issue. However, I have read recently about how that mosque, there were people barricaded themselves in there, and the police had to forcibly remove them, and they had fireworks in there and arms and the like. So I think actually the metal detectors make sense to prevent what must surely be a very small minority who wish to commit violence and to use the mosque as a staging point to cause problems and to see and provoke a reaction from the security forces. I just don't understand what the gig is, the deal is. The problem is with the metal detectors. Why can't they have metal detectors? And they still, it's not that they're blocking people from having access. They just have to be checked.
David, thank you very much indeed. Abbas, what do you say to that? Isn't this just a common sense security measure?
Well, first of all, they are blocking people. They're blocking people under 50 years old to go and pray there, right? So
hang on, I haven't seen that. I haven't read that.
Under 50-year-olds can't go and pray.
That's right, is it? Right.
50. Yeah. Now, look, we have to be sensible here, and we have to be balanced, and, we have to get along and we have to live together. What we have to do also is, let's not ignore Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the Jewish NGO, B'Tselem. What are they saying about the Israeli government? What are they saying happens to the Palestinians? It is a dire situation. It's an utter humiliation for them to live in the situation that they're in. You can't travel.
Let's be specific,
40 miles.
Abbas, just to be specific, if you don't mind, on this question of the metal detectors. Can you see the logic of them, given what happened 8 days ago or so?
But you see, Matt, if we look at things in isolation...
Well, let's for a moment. Let's for a moment, because we don't need to go into the rights and wrongs of the 1967 Six-Day War. We don't need even to understand the history to work out that there is obviously a security threat in Israel. And it's not rocket science that if 2 police officers are murdered on a holy site, that you might want, as a state that needs to defend its citizens, whether Arab or Jewish, you might want to impose certain restrictions, including having metal detectors. Is that so awful?
You see, Matt, as I said to you, if we look at the situation in isolation and start the clock when the 2 police officers died, then the metal detectors would seem very logical and very reasonable and very rational and very, very sensible to do. But when you look at it as a catalogue of events...
I get that as the emotional impact, but I don't understand why that changes the reality on the ground. Abbas, I'm only interrupting you because I've got to go to the news. Really interesting to hear your voice this morning. 0345 6060 973 if you